Good evening. Miss Babson, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right.
Excellent. Welcome everybody out there. We can't see you. I'm going to be the first to acknowledge that this is a very different setting than Julie and I are used to doing talks. We were both saying we so much. Who is that? Oops.
I don't hear anything.
All right. So that was my YouTube. It was getting replay. So we're all set now. So thank you everybody for joining us. We are now streaming live on YouTube. I just want to be the first to acknowledge that on the YouTube, we will not be monitoring the chat. We do not have tech support. So please bear with us this evening. Julie and I are attempting this on our own, and it's our first webinar together. But we would like to welcome you all here as Hopkins families for our presentation on back to school, reopening Hopkins School for the 2020-2021 school year. My name is Vanessa Bolello. I know I've had the privilege of meeting many of you in person last year, but for our returning parents, even you, I know that this is going to be a very different looking school year. And for all of our fourth grade families and our many, many new families to the Hopkinton Public Schools, welcome. We are looking forward to having your children with us. Julie?
Yep. So I'm Julie Babson. I'm the assistant principal, AKA Robin to Vanessa's Batman. As you can see in the pictures, we have a lot of spirit. We like to have a good time at Hopkins. And even though the school year will look very, very different this year, we are going to try to make it as fun and as kid-friendly as we possibly can. All right.
So we do have some goals for tonight. And before I get started, I just wanted to share a quote from Sitting Bull, who is, as you know, a Dakota Native American chief. And he made a statement as his tribes were being united to come together and face life and death situations. And he said, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. And I will be the first to admit, as a mother to two teenage daughters, that the life we're making right now is a little bit different. And it's certainly different for all of us as adults. It's also very different for our children. But it is our responsibility as adults to come together, which we do as often as we can, to support our children and make the best of the situations that we are faced. And we do so, our kids will follow on suit. So our goals for this evening are really to communicate the actions for our start of our school year. And whether that for your family is a virtual one as an elected remote family or for a family in person at Hopkins School, what is that going to look like? We have taken answers, as you know, from the Google form that we had you fill out beforehand. As I mentioned, we will not be monitoring the YouTube, so we will not be going in and looking at those questions. We've tried our best to incorporate those questions you've already asked into our slides and into our presentation. If we don't get to your questions today, we will try to follow up with more information in coming days. So we'll do the best as we can. I do want to be mindful of the time. I know it's 6:06 right now. There is a school committee meeting at 7 p.m. So we will try to end promptly by 7 o'clock so that families that are interested or planning on attending school committee have that opportunity. And I think most importantly, as I just said, this is an opportunity for us to begin to collaborate as adults who care about the children that are going to be coming to our school in either of those formats. So a couple of principles here. I hope that you have asked questions. You can continue to do so. Julie and I are inundated with emails right now, but please reach out with your concerns and questions. Feel free to offer suggestions and ideas. We need to problem solve together. This is not like anything we've done before. And please remain patient and understanding. Know that Julie and I are working tirelessly to make sure that school is a safe and happy and learning-filled environment for your children. But we are not doing this work alone. Molly Steen, our school nurse, Kim Picard, Kathy Reynolds, our secretaries, Steve Smith and Daryl Phillips, our two main custodians at Hopkins School, along with all of the teachers and staff, have been working tirelessly, many of us all summer, to prepare for this opening. And we're going to do the best we can. And, you know, we want to move forward together with all of you. So thank you again for coming tonight.
All right, so we kind of took the questions that came through on the Google form and divided them into these different key areas that we'll go through in this order. At the end of each of these sections, we'll have some of the questions that were shared in the Google form with our answers. So again, we'll go through it in this order. So many of you have probably seen the district's return to school plan. If not, there is a link to this, to the plan in this presentation, which will be shared out with you afterwards. Like we've said, we are going to answer your questions that were submitted. We will not be able to monitor the question and answer feature at this point. We were hopeful that we could, but that is something that is not going to be possible. And as Vanessa had mentioned, the chat is disabled in Zoom and YouTube. So just keep that in mind. All right, so vocabulary. There are certain words you're going to hear a lot if you haven't already. One of them is tracks, and tracks is basically how students will access instruction at Hopkins. Some students will be on site every day. Some students are in a hybrid, or I'm sorry, in a cohort. They might be in the green or orange hybrid track. Students in the green and orange tracks are placed into cohorts. So as many of you already probably know, you have been assigned to the green cohort or the orange cohort. Each cohort will consist of approximately 10 to 12 students a day. So that's around 22 students between the two cohorts for one classroom teacher. Your child will be in their green or orange cohort together all day long. And again, those cohorts are combined for a homeroom of around 22 kids. That's for the hybrid track. For the elected remote track, students are placed in homerooms, and those homerooms are around 25 students per class. Synchronous and asynchronous. Those are two words that I have never used this much until this year. So for just a little breakdown, synchronous learning means that students are live with their teacher, whether that's in the building or through a computer screen via Zoom. And this is all live instruction. It happens in real time where the teacher and the child interact in a specific place at a specific time. Asynchronous learning, students are working independently of their teacher. The teacher may have certain materials that are provided through our new learning management system called Schoology. Expectations are also shared out that way. And a lot of the asynchronous learning is on a timeline that is flexible for your schedule or your child's schedule. So we do have the district calendar that is linked to the district website that shows you the color cohort in which day that cohort will be attending school. And that's across the entire district. It's not just Hopkins. So if you have children in multiple buildings, just know that a green cohort is across all the schools. As you know, our first day of school will be Wednesday, September 16th. That is day one. That will be for the green cohort that will be in person, and as well as the students who will be on site every day. That first day of school will be a home day for students who are in the orange cohort, as well as the elected remote students. There are some options for you to change the track, whether you're on the hybrid track, the full remote track. You have some times that you can change which track you're in, and you can see on the screen those dates.
Okay, right. So as many of you who were at Hopkins last year know, 4th and 5th graders at Hopkins School have both a homeroom teacher and what we call their switch teacher. And that will continue this school year. So whether you're in a elected remote or in the hybrid model, your children will have two teachers essentially. Their homeroom teacher teaches them 3 or 2 subjects. It depends. If they're 4th grade, the homeroom teacher teaches them both reading, math, and either science or social studies, and their switch teacher will teach the other science or social studies. At 5th grade, we have departmentalized a little bit more to sort of build up to what a middle school environment looks like in terms of learning. So at fifth grade, your teachers, they will do two subjects each, and it could be math and science and social studies and ELA. It depends a little bit on the strengths and the interests of the two teachers, and they'll let you know that in their letters. I just wanted to reiterate that, as you know, the district has sent out information. We anticipate that via email, you will receive a letter from your child's teacher and perhaps their national park team. We are still organized as national parks, to learn a little bit more about your teachers. That will be coming out on September 8th, next week. You'll get that letter with your classroom assignment. And I know that central office sent out a message today, and I just want to reiterate that as well, that there are still changes happening. We will be working up through the weekend and through Monday into the 8th to make changes that are needed. So you will find out, and I'm sure your children are very excited about finally getting that information. Elected remote students, they will be meeting with teachers for portions of their day, each day from 8 o'clock in the morning till 2:30. Those are our school hours, and that will be via Zoom. Your child will be getting information on those Zoom links. That will be coming out, and teachers will share that soon. You will also have home learning assignments that are completed asynchronously. And those asynchronous assignments could be both on the computer, but also offline. Hybrid students will meet with teachers live at Hopkins School between 8 and 2:30 on their in-school day. And hybrid students will have home learning assignments to complete on their at-home day asynchronously. So as you can see, even though there's two models, there's the same kind of learning opportunities for both. It's just the format. Are you in school for your synchronous learning, or are you doing it via Zoom? But both children in both models are going to have time that is asynchronous.
All right, so buses. If your child is going to be taking the bus, there are going to be some new bus student IDs. I don't even want to call them a bus pass anymore, because it's really going to be more of a student ID. It will be used as a bus pass. I've been told by transportation that they most likely will not be mailed to you in time for that first day of school. So the first couple days of school, we're going to try to figure out how we're going to do that. But after they get mailed out to you, this will be a student ID that they will use when they enter the bus. So as a child comes onto the bus, there will be a chip reader. They'll scan their ID, as well as when they get off the bus. That will help us ensure that children are getting on the correct bus and going to the correct place. These student IDs should not be attached to the backpack. In the past, many of our students have had them attached right to their backpacks, but for this year, it will also be used for lunch. So they will be scanning this ID if they're buying a lunch, instead of pushing the buttons on the PIN code. So a recommendation is perhaps to have a lanyard for your child that they could just put around their neck to keep this student ID handy.
I would say if you're buying a lanyard, please make sure that they're breakaway lanyards. We are purchasing lanyards for masks at Hopkins, and all of those are breakaways, but those lanyards will not be able to be used for both. So if you want to get a lanyard for your child, just make sure they're breakaway. Even Julie and I wear breakaway lanyards all day long. So that's really the best way to go.
When children are on the bus, the expectation will be that they wear a mask as well as a face shield. We will get to later when you can pick up your face shields, but every child will be provided a face shield. When they get on the bus, so in the morning, the first stop, the first children that get on will be going right to the back of the bus. And then they will be loading the bus from the back to the front, every other seat, opposite sides, with one row in between. So there will definitely be social distancing on the bus.
For those of you that are new to Hopkins and Hopkinton, especially if you're coming from Elmwood, you know Elmwood and Marathon share buses. Hopkins, we are our own route. And so our buses are frequently very close to empty anyway. This year, with half the students, really about a third of the students coming on any day, the buses are going to be very empty.
Mm-hmm. So there'll be plenty of space. The buses arrived to Hopkins around 8 o'clock, which is right when our first bell is. So they go around to the back of the bus, back of the school, and we will have two doors open at either end of the back of the school. So students will enter through those two doors in the back of the building. Inside all doorways will be hand sanitizer stations. So children can sanitize their hands as soon as they walk into the building, and then they will head directly to their classroom. For those of you who will be dropping your children off, or if your child is walking or taking their bike to school, that happens at the front of the building. We do have bike racks for bike riders. They leave their bikes, and some kids even leave their helmets there on the racks as well. If you are driving your child to school, we ask that you pull all the way up. You'll be coming around by the kind of the U-shaped turn that you take coming into the front of our building, and we ask that you pull up as far as possible when arriving. Like the students on the bus, we are going to open the doors at 8 o'clock, so we will ask that children wait in their cars until 8 o'clock. And then again, we have two front doors at either end of the building that will be opened for children to enter the building. And same as the kids coming in from the bus, there will be hand sanitizer stations. They can sanitize their hands and go directly to their classroom.
So with about 220 children coming, or 250 on a day, 4 entrances to come in definitely distributes them out. If you're looking for information on that route, if you're driving your child and you haven't done the Hopkins route, all of that information is on our website. There are maps actually to show you exactly the route to come for pickup and drop off.
And I did talk to somebody in transportation today, and they are hoping to get a lot of the routes and everything finalized this week. So hopefully you'll be getting information on that this week as well. So our first bell's at 8 o'clock, and then we have an 8:15 second bell. That is kind of our homeroom time, and that's the time when children are coming in, they're unpacking, getting themselves settled. That might be a time when the teachers have a little do now kind of assignment, or some little question to ask for the students to answer to kind of see how they're feeling that day. But at 8:15, that is when our bell rings, and that's the time that, all right, school's starting. So teachers will take attendance at 8:15. We have announcements that are shared at 8:15. And the expectation will be similar for the elected remote students as well. Those classroom teachers have set up their schedule so that they will have a little bit of similar kind of come on in, see how you're doing, check in with me. But then at 8:15, that's when they will start their instruction. And for some, it could be a morning meeting instruction, but by 8:15, your child, if they are elected remote, should be online and zoomed in with their classroom.
And I would remind everybody that 8:15 is that tardy bell. That is that final, we're starting our instruction. We're going to be saying the pledge, doing morning announcements in both formats. And so a strong recommendation, if you're driving your child, get them there 8 o'clock. That gives them a good 15 minutes to get settled in their classroom. And same thing if you're an elected remote child, great opportunity for you to get in. Your child gets settled into their learning space and connect with their teacher, chit chat a little bit. That's one of the things we've talked a lot with our teachers about. They value so much those connections with children. That's why they're in this business. They want to connect with your child. So getting them in there between 8 and really 8:10 is an excellent suggestion for every family, so that they're really ready to go. We all need time to warm up and get into our learning space.
And something to always keep in mind, and I have to remind myself this too, when I'm thinking of the school year, I'm picturing what the school year looked like last year, previous years. And this year will be very different because there will be a smaller group of children arriving every day and coming into the building. So when you're thinking traffic, because traffic is always a nightmare this first 2 weeks of school, I'm hopeful that traffic will not be quite so bad. And we are flexible those first few days of school, and we have these plans in place, but we may get to the day of in reality and realize we might have to make some adjustments. So that arrival time for those first few days, we can be a little bit flexible, but once we get into the routine, 8:15 is going to be our hard, this is the day has begun. And if you come after 8:15, you will be marked tardy.
And if you've had other children come to Hopkins, or if your child was there last year in 4th grade, we only had 2 doors open. So we're doubling the number of doors, and we're taking the number of students in a third. So there will be adults at every building door entrance to remind them to be sanitizing their hands and making sure they're headed straight to their classrooms. Schedules. I know that this has been a huge question and certainly anxiety producing for everybody. And we appreciate your patience as this is getting rolled out. As you know, we've been having a lot of conversations with the teachers, trying to establish models that work and make sense for both the instructors, the educators, and the families, and most importantly, the children. What I want to really clarify for everybody today is that our class schedules are based on the time on learning requirements, and those are established by DESE, the Department of Education in Massachusetts. They give us that information and say, this is how many hours. What it works out to is time on learning every single week should be about 1,500 minutes at the elementary level. This is a requirement regardless of the model of instruction your child is in. If they're fully remote, if they're hybrid, or if they're at school full time, there's an expectation that children are doing school that amount of time. And therefore, we have made incredible allowances to make sure that the time spent synchronously and asynchronously are very, very carefully considered. So a lot of thought and energy has gone into building schedules that, given the constraints of each of these models, which certainly are something unprecedented, we've not had to face as a public school system before, that if you're in the hybrid model or the elected remote model, that time synchronous, asynchronous, meaning off time without a face-to-face teacher, are really thought about in a way that makes sense for a 4th and 5th grade learner. So what is happening at the high school in terms of asynchronous, synchronous, or marathon with the kindergarten students, very different than Hopkins school. So I think that's really important to understand. I think that there's been families that have been under a misconception, perhaps, that if I choose one model or the other, my child's going to have more time with a teacher. And I can tell you, having built a lot of schedules over this summer, and Julie can assure you as well, that the minutes really do add up to look very, very similar. So I know most of you know what synchronous lessons look like. If you think about school and you think about school at 4th and 5th grade, certainly we're not talking about a lot of lectures. The college setting or even high school level, where you think about a teacher standing in front of the classroom for maybe 30, 40, even up to 50 minutes. And we know that's not the best thing for any learner, certainly not a 9 or 10-year-old. So when we're talking about synchronous lessons, that is going to be including full class instruction, small group, individual instruction. We talk a lot about guided reading. If you've been in Hopkins schools, you know that we really value guided reading. That may look a little bit different in format, but it is essential that that occurs with small groups of readers working with a teacher to discuss books. And that is the heart of what our comprehension work with children is in. We also do writing conferences, and that can be individual or small group or full group. Direct instruction, and that would be what some people envision when they think of synchronous lessons, a teacher lecturing. We do small snippets. We know that the attention span of children, and also the way psychology tells us that people take in information, that really small snippets, 5, 10, 15 minutes is about the maximum. And on computer, that can even be less. And of course, assessments. We are going to prioritize when you're with children that they're doing their assessments, teachers and children together doing assessments. This is where things get a little bit different than maybe you're used to seeing. And the asynchronous lessons, these are the learning that we're pushing out to families. This year, this is going to be pushed out through a full learning management system, as Dr. Kavanaugh's talked about, starting at 4th grade all the way through 12th grade in Hopkinton. We will be using Schoology. So Schoology will be the learning management system where much of this is pushed out. When you think of asynchronous, it does not mean sitting in front of a computer. That could be a guided reading book that comes home and a child is reading, or their independent reading book. It could be working on math facts with flashcards, or completing a freckle assignment. That's a computer-based program that we use at Hopkins quite a lot. It could be project-based learning. We've done a lot with guided inquiry at Hopkins School, and especially in social studies or science, you can expect to see some project-based learning that's pushed out at home. Doing art projects, if you think about our related arts, It might be completing a workout video or doing a musical recording for Mrs. McDonald or Miss Barkin. So these are all different ways that your child is going to engage with learning without a teacher face-to-face with them. Schedules. I know a lot of families want to know, what is my child's day going to look like from 8 to 2:30, and that more of that information will be coming out in the coming days. But I do want to emphasize that there are mask breaks built in. So if your child's coming into school, in addition to our recess time as they're walking out there, the lunch time, we will have mask breaks built in for every single classroom. Also built into our schedules, we have recess time. And if your child is in the fully remote model, you'll see that there's built-in breaks as well. We know a child can't sit on Zoom, nor can most of us adults, though we've been trying to do it a lot for hours on end. So breaks are important. Movement breaks, I say that the movement break, the mask break now probably is going to look like a movement break of the past. Hand sanitizing, that is going to be an essential non-negotiable all the time when you're entering the building, leaving the building, when you're going into a new room, changing rooms for some reason at school. All of those that will become routines and expectations that are built into our day. Also, in terms of schedules, if your child is a student who has special education services with an IEP, if they receive ESOL services, or if they're going to be receiving support for literacy through Sarah Fox, our literacy specialist, or our math tutors, those will be individually scheduled. Some of those will take place both at school and at home. Some of those services this year, our math tutoring supports will be on home days. So whether if you're a remote learner or you're a child in the hybrid model, the math tutors are actually going to be working with children when they're doing the asynchronous work. We felt that was another way to support some of our students who need additional boosts of FaceTime, rather than having the expectation they complete all that math work on their own independently. Those schedules for each classroom will be shared out as the school year begins. So you can have a sense of, okay, my child has art on Mondays. What does our general flow of our day look like? You'll get a lot more information. If your child's in the full remote model, you can anticipate a much more detailed schedule, though there's still going to be flow to it, because there is going to be an expectation that you as the parent or whoever is supervising your child at home for their remote learning is helping them get on and off Zoom. It is not going to be a full day on Zoom, as we said. So what does those schedules look like? Here's an example of perhaps what a student in the hybrid model at school would have during their school day. What I would like to note is when they're at school, just have to remind ourselves there's going to be about 10 to 12 students in a classroom. That varies a little bit, perhaps up to 14, never more than 14. That's the top end of our cohorts. And sometimes it might be 8 or 9. But this is what their day looks like. If you notice that they have their related arts, in this case, there's music class on their home days. So if I have music on Mondays and I'm at home for music, I'm not going to have a synchronous music class that week, but I will have music pushed out again through Schoology, some assignments that I'm going to do during that week for my music learning time at home. And just a reminder that you will want to very carefully look at the district calendar to learn and make sure you're checking out what days your child is at school and what days they're at home. All right, so what does an elected remote student schedule? Well, as you look at this, you'll see it's very, very similar to the child who's in school. Now, just like the child in school, we have breaks built in. As I said, a recess time, there's a lunch break, similar times. What I would emphasize is that as you see Reader's Workshop on the schedule, or you see math and there's an hour there, your child is not necessarily going to be on Zoom for that entire hour. And I think that's very important to emphasize for you. If you've chosen the elected remote model, your child might come in for a morning, maybe a mini lesson in reading that's 10 minutes long. Maybe the teacher's reading a book, but then they're told to go off and complete some assignments in Schoology. In their math class that day, it might be that half the class is meeting with the math teacher to go through a lesson while the other class is completing their work on Schoology for the day. With 24, 25, even up to 26 students in a fully remote classroom, if we tried to do everything delivery with 25 students, it's not going to be effective at all. Just like if when we do it at school, we break students into a workshop model. Some students are getting guided reading with a teacher while others are working on Freckle. This year, those activities, the Freckle independent reading, are going to happen on students' home days. So even though the models are different names and some are at home, I think it's really important to emphasize that the amount of time with teachers is going to mirror each other. And this just kind of reiterates some of those things I just said, that we will be mindful of how much time they can stay on Zoom. And for related arts, if your child is in the elected remote model, instead of having a 45-minute or 40-minute session every other week, which is what students at school will end up having, there will just be about 20 minutes of related arts every single week. So again, that works out to the same amount of live teacher time and then asynchronous time. I know these are two areas that there were a lot of specific questions about: physical education and wellness. So students for all of their related arts will remain with their cohorts at Hopkins, their homeroom cohorts. A little bit differently than the younger grades, our students will spend more time transitioning to different spaces. We have a beautiful library. Those of you who have visited Hopkins know we have a wonderful music room and a big, large gym. We anticipate that physical education will be outside quite a lot whenever it's possible. And we expect that we will use those other spaces. Students will come in and with about 10 children in a cohort, maybe 12, there will be a lot of space in those rooms to be able to social distance. But definitely PE and wellness classes will be getting outside as much as possible. That is going to be rain or shine in a lot of cases. So make sure your children come to school prepared to be outside quite a lot. If they're outside, they can put their masks down on their lanyards if they're at distance 10 feet apart. I think it's important to remember that those PE teachers are going to just have their cohort of those 10 to 12 kids. So they'll be able to make sure that they are teaching them how to do that social distancing of even greater than 6 feet before they would ever do that. If we're indoors, if it's a day that it's just not possible to get outside and they're in the gym, we will have the screen down. Each of the PE classes, there are 2 at a time, will stay with their assigned PE teacher on their half of the screen gym with their 10 or 11 friends in their classroom. And if they're inside, the masks will stay on, and we have spaces marked in the gym to show the 6 feet of distancing. What activities the PE teachers will do will probably vary a little bit too. So if you're outside, the types of activities that they're going to do are going to be different than those indoors. We will make sure that we are minimizing, or at the beginning, certainly eliminating shared equipment. And if we do, when we are ready to introduce equipment, say we're going to do a soccer unit and we're going to be doing some kicking, you can be assured that there is going to be full sterilization of those equipment before they're used by different children. So, but those are the kinds of things we will ramp up to. Just like everything else, we're going to start with the basics, using our bodies for exercising, and work up to how do we use equipment safely. That allows our teachers to make sure children are wearing their masks correctly and are following the expectations for social distancing. Once we know that we've established that with classrooms of 10 or 12 students, then we will move on to, okay, we're going to maybe introduce a ball and use a ball for this class, and the teachers will establish the expectations on that. In terms of band, chorus, and orchestra, I know that this is a huge part of being in fifth grader at Hopkins School and in Hopkinton Public Schools, that we have ensembles. And it has certainly changed. And as a parent to musicians, my 16-year-old is certainly grieving the way that band looked in the past. But we feel it's really essential to build in some opportunities for students to learn to read music and participate. So fifth graders only, there will be a letter coming out from Mr. Hay, who is the department head, along with Mrs. McDonald, who is our instrumental music teacher. And students at 5th grade will have the options to join violin, viola, or percussion. This is going to look a little bit different than it has in the past. Those are the instrument choices this year, and your student can choose those. The groups are going to be much smaller. So rather than having perhaps all of the violins from across Team Glacier, Team Denali do lessons together, it might be a shorter lesson, but with just maybe the other violin from their cohort. So it's going to definitely start out a little bit different. We will share more information about how we imagine this occurring as we get further into the year. Theater enrichment. So as of right now, chorus is not an option for us to run. So we've made the decision. Miss Barkin has some musical theater experience and background, and we wanted to make sure we were still finding ways to build other opportunities for students outside the classroom academics. And so we will be having a theater enrichment option for students who might have otherwise chose chorus. This year, theater enrichment will be an option Ms. Barkin is offering. And as I said, there will be some more information coming from the music department about those options. I see two questions in the chat and the question and answers that I actually will answer right now before we move on, since they apply to things we've sort of talked about already. They go along with it. Lockers. We are not going to start the year with lockers. Students will be bringing them into the classrooms. We'll get to that a little bit more and explain what that'll look like. And for hybrid students, will home stay assignments be given at the end of the school day or in the morning of the home day? Excellent question. This is a huge difference from what happened in the spring. As you know, in the spring, when we were pushing out work, we were doing a full week's worth of work. This year, you can kind of anticipate as a hybrid parent that on the end of your whole school day, remember there's only maybe 10 kids in the classroom, the teacher is going to be prioritizing and letting the children know, when you go home, these are the things you're going to be working on tomorrow. So at the end of a math class, they might say, okay, tomorrow when you get home, you're going to be doing your home learning. You can watch the math video again to remind yourself of what we talked about today in our math lesson. And then you're going to do some practice problems. But we will be talking about those in school, and then they will be pushed out over Schoology for the following day. Yes, remote students will have the option to participate in musical instruments as well. Mrs. McDonald is an amazing instrumental music teacher, and she has all sorts of plans. So regardless of the model you've chosen, those are the three options that Hopkins is offering this year. So we will not be doing brass or woodwind instruments to start this year. Perhaps maybe later in this school year, we will get to that point. Percussion at Hopkins always starts with bell kits, which is a great way for students to learn and read music, as are obviously the string instruments, which allow us to stay masked and make music.
All right, so to shift gears a little bit, lunch, I did already talk a little bit about this. You've been looking at this. We've taken the tables out of our cafeteria and we've put individual desks in the cafeteria. So students will be sitting at their own individual desk. They will have assigned seats, and rest assured that the cafeteria is going to be cleaned and disinfected between every lunch. We will have 4 lunches this year. In the past, we've had 3. But what pandemic or not, we were moving to 4 lunches just because of the growing numbers of students in our classes. The cafeteria was getting crowded. As I mentioned, the students will have their ID with them that they'll bring to lunch if they're going to buy a lunch. There will be hot and cold options. Everything will be pre-packaged, bagged, or some sort of grab and go kind of container. And even elective remote students, when you get your child's schedule from their teacher, you will see that there is a built-in lunch time as well. And it will correlate with the lunch that the rest of their team is having in school. So dismissal will look a little bit different. We still have parents coming to the front of the building and buses to the back of the building. But teachers, typically, we've tried to release a little bit more independence for children at our school when it comes to dismissal. It is different than Elmwood. But this year it's going to look more like Elmwood, where teachers are walking their children downstairs or to the main hallway. Parent pickups, walkers, and bike riders, they always report to the gym. The screen will be down in the gym, so we'll have groups divided up and there will be designated spots in the gym that are 6 feet apart for students to stand or sit in while they're waiting. The parent pickup system will work very similarly to the way we've done it in the past. So for those of you who are parents of fifth graders and do the pickup at the end of the day, that's very similar. Bus students will be going to the back, and teachers will be walking their students out to the back of the building, and they'll be lining up by bus by a numbered cone, which is a very similar system that Elmwood has used. So if your child has been to Elmwood, they'll be very familiar with that system. So we did have some questions that were put in the form that we wanted to share with you. So one question was, hybrid students, will they have access to all the specials over the course of 2 weeks? Has the curriculum been modified since students will access only half as much as a previously normal year? And on remote days when a special would occur if a child was in person, will there be a remote activity associated with that special?
So definitely, there's been a lot of adjustments to the curriculum. We are still expected to teach the standards. And this year, the Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts has been very clear that he expects us to teach the grade level standards and curriculum. However, the way that's delivered is going to look a little different. We have a huge benefit on our hybrid learning model of having students that are going to be in much smaller cohorts. So a lot of intense instruction with those smaller numbers is going to occur on those at school days. And then on their home learning days, they will be practicing those skills and reviewing and continuing to build. The students in the elected remote model, that's where to make sure that the flow works and knowing that they're not going to be able to sit on Zoom for a 40-minute PE lesson, the same thing has happened, is that they've modified their curriculum to think about what are the key essential skills I want to maybe demonstrate, talk to students about, get feedback from them, also maybe assess how are they doing with their dribbling skills, and then push out assignments for them to practice on their own.
How many children will be in each remote learning class, and will there be a cap on those class sizes?
So we mentioned this earlier, but yes, right now the elected remote classrooms have about 24 to 26 students in the classroom. As I mentioned before, just remember that's the entire homeroom, but those teachers, just like the teachers who are teaching hybrid classes, are going to be thinking about cohorts within their classroom. So your child might be assigned to the A math group, and that on today, the A math group is going to be doing work on Schoology while the teacher is working with the B math group. So though there's 24 to 26 students, we do not anticipate that 26 kids will be on Zoom all day long. That's not how it's going to look. We will follow the district and state protocols around class sizes and make the adjustments as needed.
So how will we ensure that the alternate 85 at-home days are as productive and meaningful in terms of quality, content, and resources available, such as teacher to answer questions?
So this is obviously the beauty of being able to have students every other day. This is why Hopkinton in our reentry group at the district level prioritize doing an every other day model, because in some ways it really echoes what the normal flow of instruction is. Normally students come into school, we send them home with a little bit of homework to practice the skills, reinforce skills. This is taking that to the next level, where students are going to be doing that with very small numbers in person, and then on their home learning days, reinforcing, practicing those skills, reviewing what's been taught the day before. So even though it's 85 at-home learning days, I think the content of what you're going to see coming home in terms of what children are going to be doing is going to be very high quality. I've always been very proud of what Hopkins teachers do. They're amazing educators. And now not only do they have their skill set, knowing the art and science of teaching, but they also have our new learning management system, Schoology, which is going to help improve our rollouts. Google Classroom is wonderful. It has a lot of advantages, but Schoology is an all-encompassing learning management system, which Google Classroom is not. So that is going to provide a great deal of help to us to help streamline. Last year, for example, Google Classroom, it gets very hard at home as a family to manage what all my assignments are from different subjects. Schoology will set up calendars for children to help them see, and you as parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles helping your child. What are my assignments that are coming up? What's due tomorrow? What do I need to make sure I have done? But the other advantage of being every other day or even in the elected remote model is that students have that FaceTime contact with teachers on a regular basis. So if there's a day where they get home and they're stuck, then they're going to be able to come in the next day and get some help. The other thing that I want to reiterate for our families that are in the hybrid model, what happens if my child gets stuck? This year, we anticipate having several big changes from the spring. First off, we did start an academic support model last spring, later, once we were expected to roll out new instruction. And some children were invited to be part of those academic supports with paraprofessionals or teachers, and other children were invited to drop in. There's going to be a couple of options for that this year. So in terms of supporting at-home learning days, I've mentioned the various instructional models for some of our students that need additional supports, like a learning specialist helping with remote learning or a paraprofessional. In the special education world, I've mentioned the math tutors in our general education world. But for all students, we are going to have some of our general education paraprofessionals who are going to spend a lot of time making sure they know exactly what's being assigned and understand the content and curriculum, that are going to have drop-in hours so that students can actually go right to a Zoom link to get help with the math learning that they're doing that day. We recognize fully that fourth and fifth graders are not ready for full independence, and some much more so than others. So we need to look at each individual learner, and we will work and partner with you as families to figure out how much support does a child need. Should they be going in and checking in for regular academic support on their home learning days? And that's going to be a conversation between you and the teacher to make those decisions.
So I'm going to read some of these questions, but I'm also conscious of the time as well. So I think the first question is kind of an important one. Are there plans to assess and address any potential educational gaps that may have occurred before teaching resumed last spring?
So yes, we have adjusted our scope and sequence to fit in. We will be doing a lot of assessments right at the beginning of the school year to make sure that we figure out where children are.
And I'm going to jump down to the last one because I'm sure this is on everyone's mind. If a teacher has to go out sick or quarantine, who will teach the hybrid classes? And we will have substitutes available, or other staff members that are part of our school staff who will be able to fill in as appropriate. So my child's doing remote learning. Should we be buying supplies?
Yes, the supply lists have been pushed out, and we have given some suggestions from our technology department in terms of headphones with microphones, which will be helpful for all children. If your child is coming in a hybrid model, you want to make sure that those are in their pencil pouch with their supplies every single day so that they're available at school, but also available for them at home. And will elected remote students, yes, Hopkins teachers at this time are teaching all of our students at Hopkins school. There's been a couple questions in the chat that I would like to get to, Julie. Borrowing books. Yes, Ms. Party, our librarian, is working on a checkout system that's not going to be available at Elmwood and Marathon, but part of the library curriculum is actually going to be to learn how to utilize online databases of books and choose appropriate books for reading. And though the children will not be able to sort of scan the library like they have in the past and touch all of the books, they will have an ability to borrow books just like students in school. And yet, in terms of getting children to places like Kidsborough, we will have routines in place. Typically, students have gone from their classroom straight to Kidsborough. At Hopkins, we have a certain level of independence. That being said, there are a lot of adults in the hall, and with the social distancing and making sure that children are getting where they need to and going directly there, those routines are going to vary a little bit. In terms of parent pickups, you do not need to get out of your car at Hopkins School. If you've just had a Marathon child, if you're coming from other districts, you will actually stay in your car. And if you go to our school website, it talks about the pickup routines there, including the maps. And we will make sure that the Hawk Squawk, which is my newsletter that comes out, it always has links to all of those as well that explains in detail. So I'm not going to go through them all right now, but just know that they're definitely full. You do not come into the building. We actually will not be having parent volunteers or parents come into the school very much right now at all.
So this next slide talks about Chromebooks, and the question was specific for grade 5, but the answer is that all students are going to be getting Chromebooks this year to be taking back and forth between school and home. Obviously, if your child is in the hybrid track, that they would need a Chromebook when they're doing their asynchronous work during their home day. And you can see on the screen, we have specific days and times for those pickups to occur. I believe our tech department did email everybody about that, but just in case, here are the times again. We're also going to try to coordinate this time to be a time for face shields to be picked up as well. So you can pick up your child's Chromebook and your child's face shield. And then teachers who are doing the elected remote classrooms are putting together some school supplied materials, such as agendas or other things like that, that we will try to have available during this pickup time. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping for you. But these Chromebooks are something that all students will be issued, and we encourage you to take up the offer of having a school issued Chromebook. Some of you may have some device of your own, but definitely these Chromebooks will be synced with all of the programs that your child will be using. And it also, if there are any sort of tech issues and you have a school issued Chromebook, then our tech department can assist you with any of those. All right, moving along. Well, I just answered that first one. And there will still be lunch groups. We are hoping to include students who are, whether they're in school or at home, via Zoom, to be a part of lunch groups as well. And our fabulous our fabulous counseling staff will be reaching out to families of students with groups to discuss that further. All right. Good question. If my child is in the orange cohort and the first day is orange, what are we doing? So that's a great question. And some of these questions we are working on the details. So more will be coming about that soon. As I mentioned, bus assignments are coming out soon. Lockers will not be used at the start of the year. We may shift things. We'll see how things go, but students will be coming right into their classroom and putting their backpacks either by their desk, hooking them on the back of their chair. Perhaps a teacher has some sort of bin or some sort of place in the room that your child will put their backpack, their coats, their lunch. There is definitely less furniture in the rooms. You will see in a later slide, there is a photo of our classroom. So there's less furniture, which means there is more space for putting a backpack down on the floor next to your desk. And snow days, we will share more of this, but learning and instruction will continue on a snow day. I think that's one thing that we've learned through all of this craziness, is that we can continue learning instruction even if the buildings are not open.
Julie, there is a question about, there's a couple questions about Chromebooks. So
Yep.
yes, Chromebooks are available to every single student and you will be expected to come and pick those up. We do prefer that your child use our Chromebooks. Is this on the next slide?
Well, I just went back to the slide that had
Yeah.
the
So every student, whichever model you're in, they are going to pick up their Chromebooks at that date. And we do recommend that they use those Chromebooks. The technology department will not be available to support this year families that decide to use their own. The other reason that we recommend is at the 4th and 5th grade level, we have something called Relay on our Chromebooks, which allows a monitoring system. I can tell you, as the principal, and Ms. Babson can say the same thing, we were in Zooms last spring where children were doing Minecraft on their personal computers and didn't even realize the lesson had ended, even when Mrs. Bilello is saying, "Hi, Johnny." So the fact that our school computers have certain monitoring devices, also a lot of blockers to make it a safe learning environment, we would definitely recommend. Also, when we push out new updates for things like Zoom, those happen automatically. They're pushed out at a district level on the Chromebooks. There were a lot of issues in the spring where families needed to update Zoom on a personal computer and it didn't get done. So the district's providing them at this level, I would definitely recommend using them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Special education.
So special education services will continue just like they have in the past, and whatever model you receive services, you can anticipate that your child's learning specialist will be reaching out to you over the next during the next week to talk about their learning plans and discuss what their days are going to look like. It's so individualized, thus the name IEP, Individual Education Program. So it's really going to be very different child to child. So I wouldn't want to speak to that here, but do know that learning specialists will be reaching out to you in coming days to talk about that.
All right. So health and safety is on everyone's minds these days. As I mentioned, students and staff will be required to wear masks throughout the building. As I mentioned, again, students who are taking the bus will be needed to wear face shields. I don't know what happened to that slide. Something got cut off there.
That's
So
okay.
my apologies.
We're doing the best we can.
So students will be washing or sanitizing their hands before hopefully leaving your house, before coming in, before leaving a classroom, before eating, before touching their face, after arriving to school, when they finish their lunch, after using the bathroom and arriving at home. We have sanitizing stations all over our school. So that's definitely going to be a norm that everyone will be doing, wearing a mask and sanitizing our hands. So this is some information that our nurse put together for us.
Molly Steen, who's on here as a parent, I believe.
Yes,
Is that right? Hi, Molly, out there. We can't see you.
So she is recommending that if your child has any of these symptoms, even if it's one of them, please keep them home. We do not want to risk having them come into school with one of these symptoms and potentially, testing positive and then having that shared with other students in their cohort. So again, any of these symptoms, please keep your child at home. If your child is going to be absent, we are going to do the same system that we've always done. There is an absentee form. It is on our school website under students and families. If you go to the bottom, there's contacts, and there's a screenshot of a couple of things that you will see on the computer screen there. So if your child is going to be absent, you can fill out the form, or you can call our absentee call line as well, which I'm realizing that number does not match up. So use the use the number that is at the underneath the Hopkins Elementary School from our website.
There are a lot of questions in the chat, and I'm doing my best to either type answers onto the question and answers, or we're answering them live. But do know that we will add that information in as we post this slideshow on the website. We'll make sure that we get that out to you as well.
So as far as the nurse's office, students should only be visiting the nurse's office for necessary reasons to minimize interaction between students of different cohorts. We will have a medical waiting room separate from the nurse's office. So if a child shares with their teacher, I have a headache, or I kind of feel kind of hot and feverish, the teacher will be calling down to the office first to let us know that a child is on their way down. The nurse will meet the child in the hallway outside our medical waiting room. If the child does exhibit any of those symptoms or signs of COVID, they will wait in our medical waiting room until you dismiss them from school. If your child is coming down, perhaps there's a certain medication they need to take, or they're checking their insulin pump because they have diabetes, those will be taken care of in the normal nurse's office, but we will have a nurse there kind of making sure that students who have any of those COVID-like symptoms are put into a separate area, just to make sure that we keep them separate from everyone else. And at the bottom of the screen, those are the same dates, September 10th and 11th. Those are the same dates as the Chromebook pickup. So Mrs. Steen, our fantastic school nurse, will be available to pick up any medication you would like to drop off between
the teacher letters. Julie, the teacher letters will be emphasizing that it is essential that our school stay nut and peanut free outside of the lunchroom. So please, please, please make sure that the snacks that you bring, that you send with your child for snack time, are nut and peanut free. If you're sending your child with a peanut butter sandwich for lunch, that's okay, because in the lunchroom, students will have assigned seats to protect the students with allergies.
But any sort of snacks that they're going to be eating should not have any sort of nuts in them. All right, a couple of questions popped up. If a child is sick in class or out for being sick, will the class continue to meet so long as the child tests negative for COVID? The answer is yes. The children will still be in session if somebody is out sick. It will be communicated from our school nurse what steps a parent should do or take based on the child's symptoms. And we will be working very closely with the Department of Public Health when appropriate. And again, the district plan has more detailed information about that. But if your child is sick, please, please, please have them stay home. Communicate with us if they are staying home, and call our absentee line or call our office or the nurse's office to let us know.
Facilities.
Yeah, that's you.
I know we're right at 7 o'clock, and I recognize that there are people who have other places to go, but we'll continue going through these. We're getting close to the end here. Facilities. A lot of this has already been covered by Dr. Kavanaugh in all her presentations, but we just wanted to reiterate the fact that cleaning is occurring all day. I think we have the best cleaning crew in the business at Hopkins School. We have removed the air dryers will not be activated, so paper towels will be there, and cleaning will occur every single night before children come back the next day. Hopkins has actually a brand new air conditioning handling unit on much of the building. We have two that's 100% outside air. So any spaces in Hopkins, any classrooms, offices that do not have windows have 100% air coming in at a quite high rate. Julie and I have been wearing a lot of sweatshirts lately. And then the classrooms, of course, have the windows that will be open to let in a lot of fresh air as well. Also on facilities, the water fountains have been turned off. We strongly suggest that you send in 2 water bottles every day labeled to keep in their backpacks so that they have enough water. That's especially important September, October, where we anticipate it could still be very warm on certain days. Hand sanitizers, they're located in every single classroom and even smaller spaces, all the entry points. And again, we do have plenty of bathrooms that students can use to use hand soap and wash their hands that way. We do not have sinks in the classrooms though that are, I know at Elmwood there are sinks in classrooms. So that is why the hand sanitizers are going to be at a much higher rate at our school, in the middle school and high school, because we don't have sinks. And signage, it's going up now. It'll be around everywhere to remind us, as that visual reminder to make sure we're wearing our masks appropriately, along with teachers reminding children and children reminding teachers. There was a question about remote students getting materials. We are planning on having some cubbies out front in the vestibule at Hopkins. So families that need to pick up math manipulatives, perhaps because they're in a remote classroom. Your teacher will be talking a little bit about that, but you can anticipate that you're going to need to be coming to Hopkins School on a regular basis, either to return a guided reading book and pick up a new one, pick up a math manipulatives bag. So we will be sending home materials, just like if your child was in school, to practice their math with.
So I can take over. You've done a lot of talking there.
Thank you.
So you can see this is a picture of a typical classroom. As I mentioned before, there's quite a bit more space in there. Those desks are 6 feet apart. Your child will be in their classroom with their green or orange cohort throughout the day. If they have a science class and their teacher next door is the science teacher, the teacher will be coming into their classroom instead of the children moving to the teacher. And we also will make sure that the teachers have enough space apart from the desks. You can kind of see in the front of that room a little half circle. We call those kidney shaped tables, and those will be spaced enough apart from the children's desks as well. And our cafeteria, as I mentioned, the tables are gone and we have desks in there. So that's kind of a visual of what our cafeteria will look like. And it does look very different, no doubt about it, but we will try to make it as enjoyable and as kid-friendly and as much fun as we can. I think the adults are probably more apprehensive about it than the kids are going to be. From what I hear from other districts that have already gone back, that we need to give our kids more credit for their resiliency, because they can handle a lot more than we really expect them to. But again, the cafeteria will be disinfected between lunches. A lot of this information I've already shared out. So what should students be bringing to school each day? We are recommending that they should be bringing 2 extra masks with them to school, each in their own separate baggie or container. That's just in the event that one of them falls, in the mud, or something happens to one of them. They have a couple of backups. As Vanessa mentioned, a couple bottles of water, water bottles filled, because our fountains will be turned off, and it would be helpful if those are labeled. They will need to bring their Chromebook back and forth to school every day. So you will notice on the supply list that there is a recommendation to have some sort of protective case for the Chromebook. And the charger, we are hoping that those Chromebooks get charged every night, and we encourage you and your child to make sure their Chromebook is charged every night. But in the event that you forget, it would be helpful for them to bring their charger back and forth to school. They will have a bag of school supplies. So again, on that supply list, there are things like sticky notes and pencils. All of those things are going to have to be coming back and forth with them to school. So whether it's a Ziploc bag or a pencil bag, something that they can just keep all of that in. And we will be providing an art kit or a bag of art supplies for your child, so that they, again, are not sharing any materials when they go to art class, and those materials will be coming back and forth. And you will be able to see, once you get your child's schedule, what days they have art. All right, last couple of slides, last couple of questions here. So in the past, we have had CML, Continental Math League, and robotics. So people are wondering if we're going to have those this year.
Yeah, so enrichments are still on hold. That includes the ones that Julie and I ran, like CML, as well as things like our Hawk Squad. So we're hoping at some point this year to add some of those, and the HPTO is still working on coming up with a plan for their enrichment opportunities. So stay tuned. But as of right now, we're focusing on getting the learning up and running. Bikes. We don't anticipate a significant increase. If we need to add an additional bike rack, we will. So that we will kind of
when we
judge
get to
it.
it.
There's a couple of questions in the chat about, could my child just switch to a remote class on a day when they're homesick? I would remind you and come back to think about our workshop model. This is not a lecture like a high school setting. It's not a biology lecture where the teacher's going to be standing in front of the room for 40 minutes and talking about a biology concept. In the elementary model, where teachers are having conversations about a book that a child has read in a guided reading book, if your child is in school one day and they're sitting with their teacher talking with 2 or 3 other children about a book, other children are reading totally different books. So in that model, you can understand how what's happening in one classroom is not going to translate necessarily into another classroom. So that whole idea of I can just have my child sit in on a Zoom session in another classroom is not going to make sense at the elementary level here. And then the other question I do want to address in terms of assessments, we will be pushing out assessments for remote students, and the remote learning teachers will discuss how that will work to make sure that we are maintaining fidelity in our assessments. But for the most part, if your child is in the hybrid model, we would absolutely prefer to do that in school, where teachers can facilitate the assessments and make sure that we are giving it in the best environment for them to be taking a math assessment. I think those were the main questions, Julia, I wanted to get
Yeah,
to.
I can't see, you only can see them. I can't see them on my end.
Okay.
But if there are other questions that pop up, this slideshow will be shared out with everybody, so you can see the links and go over all of it again. And you can see on the last slide, we do have a form it's the same form that was sent out before, but if you have any other questions that pop up, feel free to put them in the form, and we will try to address them either in a newsletter or some other manner.
And before we close, I just want to say thank you to all of you. As I mentioned at the beginning, partnering with all of you in this extraordinary time is essential. And we know things don't look the same. A lot of teachers are grieving for the same reasons our children are, and very different reasons. We know how beneficial it is to have things like flexible seating. We also know in the midst of a pandemic, our responsibilities are to focus on safety first, and then figure out how to make adjustments from that point. So definitely things are going to look different, but what I can tell you is there's going to be high quality instruction. Wherever your child is doing their learning for Hopkins this year, we will be pushing out excellent instruction, and your children are going to learn, and they are going to connect with their teachers. And I put connection above all else. It is essential, and certainly in the midst of a pandemic. So that is our priority. We want to connect with all of you. This is not the best format for that, for sure. So please reach out to us directly. We are happy to speak with any of you. I can tell all of our families out there that our expectation for ourselves is that Julie and I will be doing coffee talks on a regular basis, meaning that you can sit at home and we will open up sessions in Zoom through our Zoom links so that you can touch base with us during the school year. We understand there's a lot of anxiety and you want to know your children are safe when you send them off to school or you put them into the Zoom rooms. And so we will keep an open line of communication to you all. We will be pushing out times and dates with those Zoom links through my newsletter. It's called the Hawk Squawk. It comes out every other week. There's a lot of information in there. I urge you to read it. We push out great videos for families, suggestions. Mrs. Steen always gives us information. So a lot of the nuts and bolts of school, but also a lot of the stuff on the social emotional learning, which is really the heart of what we do. So please read those, check out the dates for our coffee talks, and come join us for coffee, even though it's through Zoom this year. Thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Really appreciate you giving us this time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm gonna